So we come from the bike path down there. Along this path they're going to have to cross over the lights, which takes a while. Cross over again. You can see the bike lane still marked up the road, but over there is the entrance to the bike path. Fencing's all down, it's all been painted. Let's have a look. My first impression down there at the traffic lights is they haven't done a really good job of marking where the bike path is. There's lots and lots of trees around the place and the bike path is kind of hidden in amongst them. There's no pavement markings down yet. Maybe that's going to change, but there was no signage there or pavement markings or anything to indicate there was a shared path in amongst the trees. The line marking is still out there on the road for those that want to ride out there, but I could see how it'd be very, very easy to get to that set of lights and go, where's the bike path, and just continue on up the road. So I'll keep an eye on this over the next month or two and see what happens with the signage and the pavement markings.
Now, I'm not going to speed up the next bit because I want you to have a good look at what this path is like at normal riding speed. And I've got to say, it was pretty good. Now, I was expecting the path to have been constructed out of red concrete because that's what was in the initial design specification released by Cottesloe Council last year. But for some reason, it's come out in asphalt rather than concrete. Not that I'm complaining. I much prefer the asphalt to the concrete. It's just interesting that that change was made and the online doco hasn't been updated. Yeah, the path certainly seems to be wide enough. It's pretty smooth, although I guess if I was riding on a bike with no suspension, I'd see how smooth the path really was. This road crossing was fine. There's good visibility in all directions, so you can see if there's cars approaching from any direction on the roundabout, which is fine. You know, coming around here, this actually follows the line of the old footpath, so really all they've done is pull up the old path and put down a new asphalt path. You can see as we go along some of these sections that the council verges have been ripped up quite a bit, and I actually had a chat with a bloke who was relaying reticulation outside his place. Now, yes, I'll come back and have a look at this cage on this corner because the Subi Post did a story on it a couple of weeks ago, and I thought I'd have a better look at it and show you, I think, why it is like it is. You can see along there's already been some replantings done along the verge, and there's plenty of space for residents to put their rubbish bins out. Obviously, along here on the left, you can see the grass hasn't grown back yet from the construction work, but it doesn't look like too much of a mess. Now this orange skip, we're going to come back to this because a young driver ran off the road not long ago, ploughed into that skip. There's also, we just went past a bus stop, and we'll come back and have a closer look at that as well. Going up the hill here, this used to be a concrete path side to side along here. Again, they've pulled it up and just replaced it with asphalt. But I really couldn't see any issues coming along here. There's no issues with the curb lips, with the visibility on the corners, with conflicts with traffic. Even this bend here, I think, is a good idea how they've taken it in from the intersection so that you don't have conflicts with people waiting to come out of that street and turn left or right and are sitting there. We'll also come back and have a look at this bit of green paint along here because the Subi Post is not happy with this either.
God, the light's really bright. Okay, I've ridden end to end, and I've got to say it flows really nicely, and the curblets are all really nice, and I really can't see any issues with it. I've read some of the complaints that residents have put into the paper. Don't really see what the issue is. Let me just flip the camera around. So we're down at the Ocean Beach Hotel, and you can see here there's angle parking with all these cars nosed in, and then there's the shared path running down here. Now there was a complaint in the paper the other day that someone said, oh look, someone's going to reverse out of the car park there and run a cyclist over. There's so much room there between the back of those vehicles and the bike lane. If someone, they must be reversing a semi-trailer to do that.
Well, here's the article and the quote in question. It will stay like this until someone backs out and clips a cyclist. And as you can see from the footage I took there is so much space there. How could you possibly reverse out there unless you've got a semi-trailer and clip a cyclist? Now, I was filming this because I was interested in that great big slab of green paint outside the bottle shop, and I thought that was a good idea. And this car was reversing out, and I thought, yeah, this will show how hard it is to clip a cyclist. Oh, hang on, what? What? What are they doing? That's a one-way street. You can't do that. So, yes, it's entirely possible if a driver does something illegal, like reverses up a one-way street onto that bit of green paint, that they could clip a cyclist. But that's only due to a driver doing something really stupid and illegal. What they should have done is gone down the bottom to Marine Parade and turned left like normal people would. Now, next stop is this monkey cage, as residents have dubbed it, which they're complaining looks cheap and ugly. Well, yeah, maybe it does, but it's safe. It's here for safety reasons. And you can see here that, the complaints have reached council, and the council has said the town is reviewing the current fencing in favour of a more aesthetically appealing approach that also meets contemporary standards. So remember, before, residents were complaining that the path was unsafe for cyclists, it was going to be expensive and it was ugly. Now they're saying it's unsafe for drivers who are crashing their cars. It's cheap looking and it's ugly. So it's like, oh God, the council has overrun the budget, so they're complaining about how much money they've spent. Then they're complaining this looks cheap. Well, as we cross the road here, you can see right now at 1/3 speed, you can't see the drop as a drop off. Now you can. You can just see the rocks there as you start to turn. So clearly, the fencing is required to stop cyclists crossing the road and failing to turn right, hitting those rocks, potentially digging their front wheel in and face planting quite heavily into the concrete path on the other side. And I've outlined in red there the rocks. And okay, if you're a competent mountain bike rider who was used to it, you could crash over those no problems. But a kid, an inexperienced rider, someone on skinny tires would come to grief there and end up in hospital needing facial surgery, which would not be good. So a fence is clearly required. This is a safety requirement. And I've got to say to the residents who think it's ugly, I don't really care, because it's to stop people hurting themselves. It's as simple as that. And if you want it to be upgraded to something that looks a little bit better, well, stop complaining about the expense. Just, make up your mind. You can have it cheap and safe or expensive and better looking, but I don't know. Anyway, riding up the hill here from the beach is now much, much easier because it's a nice wide path. You're not on the road. You don't have to worry about dealing with drivers coming up behind you fast when you're slogging up the hill at 10 or 15 kilometres an hour, because it is a steep slope. It's not as steep as Mount Street, for instance, but it is a climb. There is no doubt about it. There is a bus stop here, and they've put down some tactile stuff, which is interesting. And I guess you just need to watch out for people wanting to catch the bus. Now, along here, you can see the verge has been really ripped up, and it's quite sandy. And residents are out there putting in retic and replanting lawns and shrubbery and all that kind of thing to re-beautify it, which I've got to say is really nice. It's good to see that the people at the western end of Eric Street are really house proud and like having a good looking street, because as we go over the hill here, I guess we get into the cheaper area where I'd call it kind of uni student housing, that doesn't exist. And there's a lot of ugly looking verges which are clearly, no one cares for them. They're covered in old cars and boats and trailers and skips, and they're not weeded, and they're not there's no flowers planted. They don't even mow the damn things, and the streetscape looks ugly as sin. So, kudos to those residents that were really worried about the impact this was going to have on the streetscape, and that they're also putting time and money and effort into, rejuvenating it. But, this is just a fact of life of when we renovate something. Most of the houses along here have probably been renovated at some point, and we know that makes a mess. Renovate a bathroom, a kitchen, bedrooms, tack something on the back, build a swimming pool, put in a new garage. You're going to make a mess for, both your house and for residents, and everyone just has to put up with it. And then you make it good, and goes back to normal, and everybody's fine. So yeah, it's not the end of the world when a project like this happens.
Well, I almost missed that little turn off there, that elbow, whatever you want to call it, because I was coming down the hill so nicely, I pretty much forgot to take it. Now, the entrance to it is good. It's a well-shaped ramp. No issues there. It's just that I guess you need to get used to actually peeling off there instead of going out on the road. What might help would be maybe putting some green paint down here so that it clearly shows you have to transition onto that and then go across there. It's the only issue I can see. So when you get to the end of the bike path, there is an issue crossing the road here. You can see the angling of that traffic light head there. It's angled out towards the traffic. You can't actually see it from here. So what you have to do is look at that traffic light to see if you've got a green light or not. There's no pedestrian crossing, there's no bicycle symbol, no nothing. So yeah, when the light went green, it took me a while to work out whether I could go or not. So a change needs to be made here to the signalling to facilitate getting across this intersection.
With this initial video out of the way, what's next? Well, clearly the next thing to do is just do it again and again and again. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Once is not enough. You have to go back and ride these things multiple times to really get a good feel for what's happening. You also need to ride it multiple times to really determine whether there's any design or build flaws in the path from a cycling perspective. I'm not going to look at it from a driver's perspective unless I happen to drive down the beach one day. I'm going to see whether they actually come back and put in some pavement markings and signage. I suspect they will. I think the path is at the stage of practical completion, which means it's rideable, but it's not 100% complete. I'm going to look out for stupid behaviour, mainly stupid driver behaviour, as we saw with that driver reversing up a one-way street. But also are there, bike riders, e-bike riders, scooter riders, skateboarders, pedestrians, whatever, exhibiting stupid behaviour around the path. Now, who's going to be using the path or not using the path? Now, I'm guessing that the fitness riders, the Peloton people that come out on Saturday mornings at 5 a.m, they're not going to be on the path, they're going to stick to the road. But do we see a move for other people, like normal people, people dressed in, thongs and bathers with a towel over their shoulder, starting to use the path to go down the beach or go down to the cafes? The other thing is, also there's a school just over the other side of, I can't remember the street name, but I want to see whether, once school goes back in, whether we start to see parents with school kids using the path in the morning or the afternoons. And lastly, of course, is verge rejuvenation, because there were some residents that made a great deal about how this was going to absolutely destroy the fabric of Cottesloe and wreck everything. Well, obviously some residents are already going back and doing a really good job of rejuvenating their verges, but is everyone going to do that? And it'll be interesting to see the mix between residents that really do care a lot and those that really don't care at all. So anyway, stay tuned over the next month or two for some more videos on this topic.